Mingyan, please, I'm begging you, just take your sister's place in the wedding palanquin. General Wei was gravely wounded on the battlefield. Not only does he look like a demon, but he's also a useless cripple who can't perform his wifely duties. Wanting has been frail since childhood, marrying him would be worse than death. My mother, Mrs. Wang, was crying so hard that her eyes were red and swollen. She clutched my sleeve tightly, almost as if she were about to kneel before me. Behind her stood my dear younger sister, Chu Wenting, dressed in plain white robes, her face streaked with tears, clutching tightly in her hand a jade pendant of extremely poor quality, a token of love given to her by her penniless scholar lover, Gao Yuxiang. Sister, I know I've wronged you, but brother Yuxiang and I truly love each other. Although brother Yuxiang is poor now, he's well-read and erudite, and he's sure to win first place in the imperial examinations someday. If I marry General Wei, brother Yuxiang will surely be unable to go on living. Chu Wanning crawled forward on her knees, trying to take my hand. I took a half-step back in disgust, dodging her touch. These are my so-called dear relatives. Although the Chu family is a wealthy merchant family in the capital with ties to the imperial court, at its core, it still favors sons over daughters. Since my father, Chu Qingyan, had no sons, he showered all his affection on his second daughter, Chu Wanting, who was sweet-tongued and knew how to play the victim. As for me, the eldest daughter of the legitimate wife, I was treated like an abacus bead from childhood onward, taught day and night how to manage the family's finances and how to devote myself to the family. Now, in order to appease General Wei Jinting, who has pacified the southern frontier, the emperor has specially bestowed the eldest daughter of the Chu family upon him as his wife. With General Wei commanding a large army and wielding immense influence throughout the court, this would normally be an excellent match. Unfortunately, rumors suggest he has a brutal temperament and kills without mercy. Worst of all, he was wounded in a vital area during an ambush 2 years ago, which has left him completely unable to have children. This imperial decree arranging a marriage, which had originally been intended for Chu Wanting, instantly became a death sentence. In order to protect her true love with that freeloader Gao Yuxiang, they didn't hesitate to push me into the fray. A stand-in bride? That's a crime of deceiving the emperor. The entire family will be executed. Do father and mother want to drag the entire Chu family down with them? I stared coldly at my father, Chu Qingyan, who stood to one side with a grim expression. Stung by my words, father's expression grew even more grim, and he said through gritted teeth, the emperor merely said he was bestowing a marriage upon a daughter of the Chu family, he did not specifically name Wanting. You, too, are a daughter of the Chu family, how is this treason? Mingyan, you've always been sensible, are you really going to stand by and watch your sister go to her death? Mature? I chuckled softly, my gaze sweeping over the faces of the three of them. I know all too well what kind of person Gao Yuxiang is. He isn't interested in Chu Wanting as a person at all, he's after the Chu family's vast fortune. His so-called erudition is nothing more than a ploy to deceive an innocent young lady who's never seen the world. Chu Wanting thought she'd escaped a disaster and found true love, but little did she know that it was actually a bottomless pit of fire. Since she's so determined to jump into the fire, not only will I not stop her, but I'll go along with it to secure a bright future for myself. No matter how cruel General Wei may be or whether he can have children, he is still a high-ranking official of the first rank. If I marry him, I'll become the matriarch of a prestigious general's household, managing the household affairs, enjoying boundless wealth and luxury, without having to endure the hardships of childbirth or continue to slave away in this biased Chu family. With such a wonderful opportunity, why wouldn't I accept it? If you want me to take her place as the bride, fine. I brushed imaginary dust off my sleeve, my voice so calm that not a hint of emotion could be detected. As soon as those words were spoken, the sobbing in the room came to an abrupt halt. Chu Wanting's eyes lit up with wild joy. Her mother let out a long sigh of relief, and her father flashed a smug smile, knowing his scheme had succeeded. Good. Good. I knew you'd be sensible. However, I have one condition. I bluntly interrupted my father's polite small talk, pulled a pre-written sheet of Xian paper from my sleeve, and slammed it down on the rosewood table with a thud. What's this? My father asked, furrowing his brow. My slender fingertips tapped the paper as I spoke, enunciating each word clearly. I want the deed to the 3 most prosperous silk shops on West Sh Street, the 2 hot spring estates south of the city, and the 100,000 taels of silver that mother had originally intended as a dowry for Wan Ting. Finally, I want father to sign this deed of establishing my own household. From this day forward, I, Chu Mingyan, am married into the Wei household. Whether I live or die, whether I face honor or disgrace, I shall have no further connection whatsoever with the Chu family, and the Chu family shall not dare to exploit my name to gain even the slightest advantage. You are out of your mind. My mother screamed. The shop on West Street was your father's life's work, and those 100,000 taels of silver were meant for your sister in the future. Are you planning to help that penniless scholar navigate the bureaucratic world from now on? I said with a cold laugh, calling her bluff. My father was so furious he was shaking all over. He pointed at my nose and shouted, "You wretch! How dare you take advantage of the situation? You're a married woman who's supposed to follow her husband's lead. What do you need all that property for?" I completely ignored his rage, turned toward the window, and yanked it open. Outside the window, the deafening sound of gongs and drums was now just a stone's throw away. The Wei family's armored bodyguards, sent to escort the bride, surged forward like a black torrent of steel, blocking the entrance to the Chu family's estate. Their grim, martial aura pierced through the courtyard walls, reaching all the way to the bridal chamber. Father, General Wei's second-in-command is already waiting in the front courtyard for the palanquin. I've heard that General Wei hates nothing more than being deceived or outmaneuvered. Do you think that if I were to go out right now and tell General Wei's second-in-command that you're trying to pull a substitute the peach for the plum scheme and aren't even willing to provide a dowry, the Wei family's iron cavalry would raze the Chu family to the ground this very moment? I turned my head and looked at Chu Qing'an, whose face had gone pale in an instant, a mocking smile curving my lips, trading a mere few shops and some silver for the lives of every member of the Chu family, including my sister's so-called true love. Do you think that's a bad deal, father? The room was deathly silent. Outside, the neighing of war horses pounded against their hearts like the beat of a death knell. Give it to her! Chu Qing'an looked as if he'd aged 10 years in an instant. Gritting his back teeth, he ground out those 2 words through clenched jaws. He quickly had someone fetch the land deed and the silver notes, then pressed his thumbprint firmly onto the deed. I carefully examined every deed and promissory note, and after confirming they were in order, I tucked them safely into my robe. That heavy weight was the very foundation of my existence in this world. Thank you, Master Chu. I no longer called him father. Turning to look at Chu Wanning, whose eyes were filled with jealousy yet who was desperately trying to hide it, I said, "My dear sister, I wish you and your husband, Gao, a lifetime of happiness together until you grow old." I grabbed the bright red veil lying on the table and swiftly pulled it over my head, blocking my view. Without needing them to urge me on, I strode out of that squalid home with steady steps, flanked by a group of maids and matrons who were trembling with fear. Chu Wanting, you thought you were pushing hell onto me, but little did you know, that was my ladder to success. As for that good-for-nothing who only knows how to write poetry to swindle money, you can keep him and enjoy him at your leisure. I'll just have to see how long your true love lasts without the Chu family's vast fortune propping it up. The deafening sound of the swana gradually subsided, and the wedding palanquin came to a steady stop in front of the Wei family mansion. There was no elaborate wedding procession. They even skipped the tradition of kicking the palanquin door. A rough yet strong hand lifted the palanquin curtain, and immediately afterward, a deputy commander clad in jet-black armor said in a deep voice, "Miss Chu, the general is waiting for you in his study. Please follow me through the main gate into the mansion." As soon as those words were spoken, the onlookers who had gathered around gasped in astonishment. According to custom, I was merely a substitute bride from a merchant family. Being allowed to enter through the side gate was already a tremendous blessing. Was General Wei's gesture meant to spare me embarrassment, or did it hold some deeper meaning? Without the slightest hesitation, I took the hand of my bridal maid and stepped steadily out of the wedding palanquin, crossing the high threshold of the general's mansion. Though my view was limited by the veil, I could sense the chill and vigilance radiating from the mansion. As I made my way through the compound, I heard not a trace of the laughter and merriment typical of a wedding in an ordinary household. Instead, the clanging of patrol guards' armor clashing together rang out ceaselessly. Soon, I was led into a spacious inner room, and the door closed with a dull thud behind me. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The air was filled with a faint scent of sandalwood and an indescribable, fierce, martial aura. "Take off the veil yourself, I'm not one for all that red tape." A deep, icy voice echoed from the far end of the room, like the clanging of ice, commanding respect without a trace of anger. Without the slightest hesitation, I yanked off the red veil weighing more than 1,000 jean that covered my head and looked up. The moment I recognized the person standing before me, a fleeting look of surprise flashed across my face. Rumor had it that Wei Jinting had half his face burned away by poisonous fire on the battlefield in southern Xinjiang, leaving him with a face like a demon, one that could silence even a crying child at night. Yet the man now seated upright in the rosewood armchair showed not the slightest trace of disfigurement. On the contrary, he possessed sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, his features as deep and perfect as if carved by a chisel. He wore a dark red wedding robe, with a wide black leather belt casually fastened around his waist, perfectly accentuating his powerful physique, broad shoulders and a narrow waist. Those dark eyes, as deep as an abyss, were coldly scrutinizing me, radiating the oppressive aura of someone who had long held a position of power, as if they could see right through me with a single glance. Chu Mingyan, the eldest legitimate daughter of the Chu family. His slender fingers tapped lightly on the desk. "What's the matter? Are you disappointed to see that this general wasn't burned into a hideous monster?" "The general is joking," I said, quickly hiding my surprise as I calmly sat down in an armchair nearby and even poured myself a cup of warm tea. "If the general truly looked like a demon, how could the emperor possibly trust you with command of the troops at the camp on the outskirts of the capital? Those rumors are merely a ploy the general uses to weed out spies and avoid those ill-advised political marriages." Wei Jinting paused briefly as he tapped the table, a flash of sharp interest crossing his eyes. "You're quite clever. Since you're so clever, you should know that the Chu family pulled a fast one, replacing Chu Want, who was supposed to marry me, with you. That's deceiving the emperor, and it's deceiving me as well. General, please understand, the Chu family has indeed deceived you." I met his gaze without hesitation, pulled the contract, which I'd forced my father to sign before my marriage, from my sleeve, and pushed it toward him. "That is why I used the Chu family's most profitable business and 100,000 taels of silver to completely sever all ties with them. From now on, there is only Chu Mingyan, the matriarch of the Wei household. There is no longer a Miss Chu of the Chu family." Wei Jinting glanced at the contract bearing a bright red fingerprint, and a cold, emotionless smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. 100,000 taels? You really have the nerve to ask for an exorbitant sum. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you right now and confiscate this huge sum? "I'm not afraid," I said, looking him straight in the eye, my tone calm yet firm. "Because what the general needs is not a Chu Wenting who spends her days weeping and chasing after vanity, but an ally who can safeguard your home front and ward off all manner of evil spirits. Since the general is unable to have children, and I have no desire to bear children and endure the pain of childbirth, we'll each get what we need. I will help the general turn this vast mansion into a fortress, ensuring that the sordid affairs of the inner quarters never trouble you in the slightest. In exchange, the general will grant me the dignity and protection befitting a principal wife. This is a deal where I stand to gain, not lose." These words were extremely blunt, even bordering on treasonous arrogance. Wei Jinting stared at me intently for a long time, and a hint of an inscrutable smile gradually appeared in his deep eyes. "You're very bold." He stood up, and his towering shadow instantly engulfed me. He walked up to me and looked down at me from above. "This general's mansion is teeming with spies from all sorts of factions, even the kitchen steward might be working for the Empress Dowager. You're just a merchant's daughter, what gives you the audacity to claim you can run this place?" "I don't believe in fate, I rely on the silver in my hands and the ruthlessness in my heart." I tilted my head back, showing no sign of backing down. "If you don't believe me, General, give me half a month. If, after half a month, there's even a single thorn in this mansion that doesn't belong to you, I, Chu Mingyan, will come before you with my head on a platter. Excellent! Wei Jinting suddenly burst out laughing. His laughter was so loud it caused the candles in the room to flicker slightly. I like that kind of ruthlessness in you. Chu Mingyan, remember what you said today. He casually unfastened a jet black, mystical iron token from his waist, one carved with a totem of a fierce tiger descending a mountain, and tossed it into my lap. Here are the tokens to access the Wei Manor's personal guards and storerooms. From now on, you are the mistress of the Wei Manor. Go ahead and do whatever you need to do, even if the sky falls, I'll be there to catch you. As I clutched the cold, heavy token, my heart skipped a beat, something that rarely happened. It wasn't because of a flutter of romance, but because my intense thirst for power had finally been quenched. Thank you, General. I stood up and gave a crisp, clean bow. On their wedding night, there was no passionate lovemaking beneath the red canopy, only a calm yet deadly alliance. Wei Jinting was indeed as useless as the rumors suggested. After giving me my instructions, he went to the armory in the front courtyard, leaving me alone in the empty room. Yet I slept more soundly than ever before. Because I knew that from this moment on, my fate was truly in my own hands. Early the next morning, I changed into a dark red matriarch's formal gown, with a single, simple yet majestic ruby-set red gold hairpin tucked diagonally into my bun. Holding the black iron token, I headed straight for the front hall of the general's mansion, accompanied by two shrewd and capable maids from my dowry party. Those stewards who thought the new mistress was out of favor and were just waiting to see me make a fool of myself have no idea that their good times are coming to an end. The front hall was packed with the various stewards and matron servants of the general's mansion. I sat upright in a large, carved rosewood armchair, fingering a set of exquisite gold and silver inlaid teaware. The aroma of tea wafted gently through the air, yet it could not mask the restless and dismissive atmosphere in the hall. News that the general had spent the night in the armory had long since spread throughout the entire estate. In the eyes of these servants, I, an unfavored merchant's daughter who had been married off as a substitute bride, was nothing more than a soft target they could mold and manipulate at will. Madam, an elderly woman wearing a dark red, front-fastening silk blouse and with a face full of coarse features stepped forward first. She was Auntie Li, the stewardess of the inner courtyard, reportedly a servant bestowed by the Empress Dowager herself, and she was accustomed to ruling the manor with an iron fist. She slammed a thick stack of ledgers down on the table and said with a forced smile, "These are the manor's accounts for the past half-year. Since you have taken on the duties of managing the household, please review them. However, the general's mansion has enormous expenses, it is not like a modest household. If you do not understand them, this old servant can handle it for you." I didn't look up. I just casually opened the top ledger. Throughout my past and present lives, I was forced to review the Chu family's accounts for over a decade. I know those old foxes' methods for cooking the books inside and out, let alone a shoddy trick like this. My eyes darted rapidly over the dense array of numbers. In less than the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, I snapped the ledger shut with a snap and gave Matron Li a cold stare. "Auntie Li, is this the account you submitted?" My voice wasn't loud, but it carried a bone-chilling coldness. "Last month, when we bought black charcoal, the market price was no more than 200 won per basket, yet you recorded 800 won on your books. The amount of pork consumed daily in the kitchen is actually more than what 50 strong men in the barracks would eat. Over the past 6 months, from these 2 items alone, you've embezzled no less than 3,000 taels of silver. What an insatiable appetite you have." As soon as I said that, the entire room erupted in an uproar. The other managers exchanged glances, clearly not expecting me to pinpoint the flaw so accurately in such a short amount of time. A look of shock flashed across Matron Li's face, but she immediately drew on her connections, straightened her back abruptly, and shrieked, "Madam, do not make such baseless accusations. This old servant has served the general's manor with utmost dedication, and all these expenses are fully documented. Besides, I was personally bestowed upon this household by Her Imperial Majesty the Empress Dowager. What right do you, a mere merchant's daughter, have to audit my accounts?" Someone from the Empress Dowager's entourage? I laughed bitterly in my rage, sprang to my feet, and slammed the black iron token, engraved with a totem of a tiger descending the mountain, down hard on the table. A dull thud echoed through the room, causing everyone to flinch. Since you recognize this token, you should know that here at the Wei Manor, the General's rules are law. I don't care if you're backed by the Empress Dowager or the Jade Emperor himself, anyone who dares to line their own pockets within the General's residence is guilty of a capital offense. I shouted sharply, my gaze as sharp as a knife as it swept over all the servants present, who stood frozen in fear. Someone! Drag this insolent servant out and give her 50 heavy strokes with the military cane. Confiscate her private property outside the mansion and sell her and all her accomplices into forced labor. Auntie Li was truly panicked now. She never expected me to dare lay a hand on the Empress Dowager's people. Just as she was about to throw a tantrum and roll on the floor, 4 personal guards clad in black armor suddenly burst into the hall. They recognized only the token, not the person, and without hesitation pinned Auntie Li down and dragged her out like a dead dog. How dare you! I'm the Empress Dowager's woman. Not even Wei Jinting would dare treat me this way. You wretch! Matron Li's shrill screams echoed through the courtyard, but they were soon drowned out by the dull thud of a military baton and agonized cries. I sat back down in my chair, picked up my teacup, and gently skimmed off the foam, my gaze sweeping coldly over the remaining stewards, whose legs were trembling. Next, Steward Wang. You were in charge of purchasing medicinal herbs, but you passed off inferior ones as high-quality ones and even secretly sold the General's medicinal ointment on the black market. Cut off your own arm and get out of the Wei residence. Manager Zhang, you have been secretly withholding the people's monthly wages and abusing your power to bully them. Hand over the embezzled silver, and you and your entire family will be expelled from the capital. Every time I called out a name, it was as if the King of Hell were taking attendance. I exposed all their disguises with pinpoint accuracy. In just half an hour, the entire front hall was filled with people kneeling on the floor, their cries for mercy rising one after another. I showed not the slightest mercy. With my thunderous measures, I thoroughly purged all the spies planted by various factions and the corrupt officials who had lined their own pockets. It seems the lady won't need half a month after all. A deep, amused voice came from behind the screen. Wei Jinting, dressed in a black everyday robe, strode into the front hall. His stern gaze swept over Matron Li, who was being punished in the courtyard, and a hint of undisguised admiration flashed in his eyes. General. I set down my teacup and nodded slightly, my expression so calm it was as if I hadn't just been the one to order someone's limbs to be broken. You really had the nerve to hit one of the Empress Dowager's people. Wei Jinting walked over to my side and stared at me intently. Since you've entrusted me with this token, I will naturally eliminate every threat within this mansion on your behalf. I met his gaze. As for the Empress Dowager, haven't you wanted to get rid of her for a long time? I'm merely taking the fall for you by being labeled jealous and overbearing. Wei Jinting suddenly let out a low chuckle. The sound vibrated through his chest, carrying a sense of extreme, unrestrained delight. Well done, Chu Mingyan. He suddenly reached out and gripped my shoulder firmly. The force was immense, yet devoid of any sensuality, expressing only the absolute recognition between a general and his commander. From this day forward, within the inner quarters of the Wei Mansion, you alone shall be held in the highest regard. Anyone who dares to show you disrespect is showing disrespect to this general. They shall be executed without mercy. With Wei Jinting's words, my position at the general's mansion became as solid as a rock. The stewards who had been reinstated treated me with the utmost reverence. In just a few short days, I had transformed the general's mansion, which had once been riddled with holes, into a fortress as secure as an iron barrel, ensuring that no information could ever leak out again. That night, Wei Jinting came to my main courtyard, something he had never done before. Instead of going to the armory, he sat down beside my bed. Moonlight streamed through the window lattice, casting a glow on his sharply defined face. In those deep, piercing eyes, the cold, scrutinizing gaze from our wedding night had vanished, replaced by a hint of tenderness that even he himself had not noticed. Chu Mingyan, his deep voice rang out with exceptional clarity in the silent night. I've suddenly realized that marrying you is the best deal I've ever made in my life. I let a faint smile play on my lips. With my contractual ally going this far, I've already won half the battle. As for the other half, I'm in no rush. Within this bastion of power, what I've ever wanted has never been just a title. 3 months after taking over the household affairs at the general's mansion, I had completely tamed this colossal operation. I had rooted out every last one of the minions who dared to stir up trouble, and Wei Jinting's trust in me had reached its peak. He even handed over the financial records of his businesses to me without reservation. It was a clear, crisp day. Dressed in a sumptuous peacock blue brocade skirt with gold threading, my hair styled in an elaborate startled goose bun, and accompanied by 4 burly bodyguards, I climbed into the general's mansion's spacious carriage, adorned with purple bronze wind chimes, to inspect the shops on West Street that I had brought with me from the Chu family. As the carriage approached the busiest section of West Street, the sound of a loud argument came from ahead, blocking the road completely. "Hit him! Give that freeloading bastard a good beating!" I lifted the carriage curtain slightly and saw that in front of Jinsho Pavilion, the establishment registered under my name, several burly guards were beating up a scholar dressed in a pretentious manner. Beside the scholar, a woman wearing a slightly worn pink blouse and skirt, her hair disheveled, was wailing hysterically as she clung to the guard's legs. "You blind fools! This is the future top scholar, and I'm the second young lady of the Chu family. If you dare hit us, I'll have my father tear down your lousy shop." That shrill, piercing voice, who else could it be but my dear younger sister, Chu Wenting, who, for the sake of true love, refused to marry into the general's household no matter what. I sneered inwardly. It seemed that without my dowry of 100,000 taels of silver, Chu Wenting had been living a truly exciting life these past few months with that penniless scholar. "Stop the carriage," I said calmly, and, supported by my maid, I slowly stepped down from the carriage. "Tear down my shop? Miss Chu too, you've got some nerve." My cold voice cut through the noisy crowd, carrying an aura of authority that brooked no resistance. The onlookers, seeing my attire, which suggested I was either wealthy or of noble birth, and the menacing personal guards behind me with their hands on their sword hilts, instinctively parted to make way for me. Upon hearing my voice, Chu Wenting jerked her head up. When she saw how elegant and majestic I looked at that moment, her eyes instantly flashed with intense jealousy and disbelief. She had originally thought that, having married that rumored general, a good-for-nothing with a face like a demon and a violent temper, I would surely be tormented day after day and look haggard and emaciated. Yet here I am now, with a rosy complexion and an air of dignity that surpasses even that of the empresses in the palace. In contrast, she herself has not only lost the glamour of the former Chu family heiress but now looks as disheveled as a common shrew. "Chu Mingyan? You! What are you doing here?" Chu Wenting's voice trembled. Then, as if she'd found a lifeline, she scrambled toward me, only to be pushed back a half-step by my maid, who looked at her with disgust. "Sis! Make them stop right now. They're going to beat Brother Yuxiang to death." When the proprietor of Jinsho Pavilion saw me arrive, he hurriedly stepped forward, looking both flustered and humbled, and bowed respectfully. "Sir, you're here." These two came into the shop, specifically asking for the most expensive shoe brocade, and had 10 sets of garments cut out in one go. When it came time to settle the bill, the scholar said the young lady accompanying him should pay, but she claimed she hadn't brought any silver and wanted to charge it to the Chu family's account. "You instructed that our shop has long since severed all ties with the Chu family, so I refused." The scholar then tried to seize the goods by force, which is why I had my men intervene. After hearing that, a mocking smile played on the corners of my mouth. Gao Yuxiang really is a total scumbag who only knows how to live off others. He thought that by eloping with the Chu family's most beloved second daughter, he'd secure a hefty dowry to help him advance his career. Little did he know that before I left, I cut off his lifeline by taking all the valuable assets. In a fit of rage, Chu Qingyan went so far as to confiscate all of Chu Wenting's personal savings and kick her out onto the street. Without the backing of real money, these two's so-called true love instantly turned into a joke filled with mutual recriminations. As for today's little drama, it's most likely that Chu Wenting, desperate to save face in front of Gao Yuxiang, who's desperately short on cash, gritted her teeth and came to buy clothes, hoping to pull the same trick again and get a free ride off the Chu family's business. Little did she know that this store had long since changed hands and been re-registered under my name. Sister, since you're the owner of this shop, let's just consider these outfits a wedding return gift from your younger sister. As the wife of a general, surely you wouldn't quibble over such a small amount of money, would you? Seeing that her scheme had been exposed, Chu Wenting showed no shame. Instead, she adopted a haughty, self-righteous tone. You may be well-dressed, but everyone knows you're married to a eunuch whose life is worse than death. You're doomed to have no children and will die childless. What a curse. I'm still carrying Brother Yuxiang's child. If you anger me, the Chu family will never let you off the hook. When I heard her still using phrases like ending the family line to rub salt in my wounds, not only did I not get angry, but I actually couldn't help but laugh out loud. Chu Wenting, have you lost your mind? I looked down at her from above, my gaze as cold as if I were looking at a pile of trash. On the day of my wedding, I signed a document severing all ties with the Chu family. All ties of kinship and loyalty are cut. Never mind that you just want a few sets of clothes. Even if you were to starve to death right here on the street today, I would never give you a single coin. At this point, I raised my voice and called out loudly to the people gathered around, neighbors, judge for yourselves. This Gao Yuxiang, a penniless scholar, first lured a young lady from her secluded home into eloping with him, and now that he has no money to pay the bill, he actually expects her to foot the bill afterward. Such a shameless, irresponsible son-in-law, and he still dares to dream of passing the imperial examinations? He is truly a disgrace to the scholars of our great Li dynasty. Bystanders love this kind of feuding among the wealthy. As soon as I said that, they all started pointing at Gao Yuxiang, who was pinned to the ground, and hurling insults at him. Pah! What a piece of work, turns out he's just a freeloading ingrate. With character like that, he wants to be the top scholar? He probably couldn't even get into a pigsty. Gao Yuxiang was drowned in a torrent of insults, and his face, already bruised from the beating, turned the color of a pig's liver. His twisted psyche, marked by extreme insecurity and extreme pride, erupted completely. He suddenly broke free from the guard's grip and lunged at Chu Wenting like a mad dog. With a loud smack, he delivered a resounding slap to her face. You worthless whore! Didn't you say all the shops on West Street belong to your Chu family? You good-for-nothing, money-wasting good-for-nothing, not only have you ruined my reputation, but you're forcing me to suffer humiliation alongside you. How could the Gao family ever want a shameless harlot like you? The slap sent Chu Wenting tumbling to the ground, blood trickling from the corner of her mouth as she stared in disbelief at the true love who had once claimed she would defy the imperial edict for him. Gao Yuxiang, how dare you hit me? I'm going to beat the living daylights out of you, you jinx. Gao Yuxiang had completely lost control. Stripping away his hypocritical scholar facade, he was nothing more than a hot-tempered, violent thug. In front of everyone on the street, he kicked and cursed at Chu Wenting, hurling the most humiliating insults at her. That once passionate pair, who had once sworn undying love and vowed to live and die together, were now tearing at each other under the scorching sun, turning the whole thing into a colossal farce. I watched the scene coldly, without even a flicker of sympathy. Shopkeeper, go report this to the authorities. I smoothed out the gold thread on my sleeve, turned without looking back, and walked toward the carriage. If they dare cause trouble on property belonging to the general's mansion, let them go to the Jingzhou prefect's jail and take their time recounting their true love there. Once I was inside the carriage, I slammed the curtains shut, cutting myself off from the cries and shouts outside. This is the path you've chosen for yourselves. Even if it leads through mountains of knives and seas of fire, you'll have to crawl on your knees to the very end. Time flies. It has been nearly a year since I took up residence at the Wei mansion. The rumors that Wei Jinting was cruel and infertile not only failed to be the straw that broke the camel's back, but instead became the perfect cover for us. We worked in perfect harmony both in public and behind closed doors. I managed the Wei household as if it were a fortress, and no one dared to act out of line anymore. And the tenderness that flowed between us in the dead of night had, through our daily life together, naturally evolved into the reality of a true married couple. What surprised everyone the most was that, 6 months after our wedding, during a routine pulse diagnosis for a common cold, the imperial physician actually detected an extremely rare pulse of twins in me. That iron-willed general, who, according to rumor, had suffered a life-threatening injury on the battlefield, actually had tears well up in his eyes when he heard the imperial physician say, "A smooth pulse like pearls, a sign of twins." In a rare display of emotion, he granted half a year's worth of monthly allowances to everyone in the household. To guard against the schemes of our political enemies in the court, we kept the news of the twins a secret from the outside world, claiming it was merely a normal sign of pregnancy, and focused on ensuring a safe pregnancy. After 9 months of pregnancy, the time had finally come. On a dawn when the first snow fell, I gave it my all and gave birth to a healthy set of twins, a boy and a girl, for Wei Jinting. Today marks the 1-month anniversary for the 2 children. A grand banquet was being held in the front hall of the general's mansion to entertain the high-ranking officials and nobles who had come to offer their congratulations. Since I had just finished my postpartum confinement and was advised not to be exposed to drafts, I was resting in a warm chamber in the inner quarters. Listening to the commotion outside, I felt a sense of peace I had never experienced before. "Madam," said the maid Suewei, lifting the curtain and stepping inside with a strange look on her face. She lowered her voice and continued, "There's a madwoman outside the gate who insists she's your own younger sister. She's throwing a fit and rolling around at the entrance, and her language is extremely offensive." The guards were afraid of disturbing the distinguished guests in the front hall, so they tied her up and dragged her through the side gate to the woodshed in the backyard. "What would you like us to do with her?" I narrowed my eyes slightly. "Chu wanting?" I heard that Gao Yuxiang had his academic title revoked for cheating on the imperial examinations, and after racking up a mountain of gambling debts, he callously sold Chu Wanting into a secret brothel to settle his debts. I had assumed she had long since died in that dark, windowless place, but to my surprise, she actually managed to escape, and even had the nerve to show up at the general's mansion to cause trouble. "Bring her out into the courtyard, I don't want her to dirty my room." I threw on a snow-white fox-fur cloak and, supported by Suewei, walked out of the warm chamber. In the courtyard, Chu Wanting was pinned to the ground by 2 burly old women. Her clothes were in tatters, she reeked of a nauseating, rancid stench, and her face was covered in bruises. There was not a trace left of the delicate, refined appearance she once had as the second young lady of the Chu family. When she saw me walking out, looking glamorous and surrounded by a crowd, a look of intense hatred flashed in Chu Wanting's eyes, as if she wanted to tear me to pieces. "Chu Mingyan! How dare you deck yourself out in gold and silver? You've stolen my big day!" She struggled violently like a mad dog, hurling insults at her. "Do you really think you can cover up the fact that Wei Jinting is a eunuch just by bribing the imperial physician to give you a fake pregnancy? Let me tell you, I'm carrying Brother Yuxiang's child, that's the real heir. You're married to a good-for-nothing. You're destined to have no descendants. You'll spend your whole life as a worthless hen that can't lay eggs." She cursed at the top of her lungs, trying to use the most vicious language possible to shatter what she imagined to be my hypocritical glory on this joyous occasion. Bang! Just as she was screaming at the top of her lungs, the heavy, carved wooden door to the inner courtyard was violently kicked open, producing a deafening crash. The once bustling courtyard fell silent in an instant. Wei Jinting, clad in a dark red brocade robe, strode into the courtyard like a fearsome deity. His sharply defined face was etched with thunderous fury, and he was enveloped in a chilling aura of murderous intent so intense that it seemed to freeze the very air around him. But what really made Chu Wanting's eyes pop out of her head was Wei Jinting's action at that moment. That crippled general, who, according to rumors, couldn't even lift a sword, was now steadily cradling 2 beautiful, chubby twins swaddled in blankets with his strong, powerful left arm. The way he held the babies with just one hand exuded an aura of untouchable dominance and tenderness. Without even glancing at Chu Wanting, Wei Jinting walked straight over to a stone table nearby, grabbed a scalding blue and white porcelain teacup with his right hand, and mercilessly smashed it into Chu Wanting's mud-stained face. With a sharp crack, the teacup shattered, and scalding tea mixed with blood instantly splattered all over Chu Wanting's face. Ah! She let out a piercing scream. May your dog's eyes be blinded. Wei Jinting's voice was like that of a hellish demon, devoid of any warmth. My dragon and phoenix twins are right here. How dare you, you vile woman, bark so wildly. Drag her out and beat her. Chu Wanting rolled around on the floor in agony from the scalding water. She stared intently at the two infants in Wei Jinting's arms, whose features bore a striking resemblance to his, and screamed in despair, "It can't be. This can't be. He's a cripple. You're lying to me. You're all lying to me." Her prized true love and ability to bear children, the very thing she took such pride in, were completely crushed into dust in the face of the boy and girl twins in Wei Jinting's arms. She finally realized that not only had she missed out on unimaginable wealth and prestige, but she had also single-handedly pushed herself into a hell from which there was no escape. Gag her, give her 50 military strokes, and toss her into the mass grave to be fed to the dogs. Wei Jinting coldly issued the order, showing not a shred of mercy towards such a lowly insect. The old women immediately pounced on her like wolves, stuffing a ragged cloth into Chu Wenting's mouth and dragging her out like a dead dog. The dull thud of a military baton soon echoed outside the courtyard, but it could no longer disturb the tranquility within. I watched the scene with indifference, feeling not a shred of sympathy, only a sense of relief that the ties between my past and present lives had been completely severed. When Wei Jinting turned around and walked toward me, the murderous glint in his eyes instantly melted into a tenderness as gentle as spring water. He carefully handed the child in his arms to the wet nurse, then clasped my icy fingertips tightly with his broad, calloused hands. "It's windy out here. Don't stand there looking at that filth. I'll go back inside with you to check on the baby." The agonizing screams from outside the courtyard soon subsided. Wei Jinting wrapped his arm around my shoulders and gently escorted me back to the inner chamber, which was as warm as spring. The wet nurses, sensing the situation, took the two swaddled infants, who had just finished feeding, and withdrew to the side chambers. Only my husband and I remained in the room, along with our personal maid, Chui Wei. "General, there were so many guests in the front hall today, why did you suddenly turn back to the rear courtyard?" I removed his cloak, which was slightly damp with melted snow, and handed it to Suiwei, who was standing nearby. Wei Jinting took my hand in his, gently rubbing it in the palm of his hand to warm it. A hint of resignation and tenderness flickered across his stern features. "No matter how skilled those old foxes in the front hall are at getting you drunk, they can't compare to how much I care about you and the child." As soon as I stepped into the hallway, a secret guard reported that a crazy woman was outside the door hurling insults at you, so I rushed straight over. "Such filthy language isn't fit to soil your ears." I smiled faintly and clasped his warm, calloused hand in mine. "She's nothing but a petty clown. If I let her get to me, wouldn't all these past half a year as the head mistress of the household have been for nothing?" Just as they were speaking, Suiwei approached, carrying a bowl of freshly prepared red date and bird's nest soup, and reported in a low voice, "Madam, I just had someone look into Chu Wanning's background. That wretch got what she deserved, she wasn't even pregnant." I paused briefly as I lifted the bowl of bird's nest, raising an eyebrow to signal Suiwei to continue. "Last month, Gao Yuxiang ran up a huge debt to an underground loan shark through gambling. Driven to the brink of despair, he planned to sell Chu Wanting to the most disreputable brothel. To save her life, Chu Wanting, having somehow obtained a cloth pouch that she hid in her clothes, pretended to be sick every day, feigning dry heaves and telling Gao Yuxiang she was carrying a son, convincing him to spare her life for the time being. Gao Yuxiang believed her and, using this unborn son as an excuse, went back to the loan shark to negotiate a few more days' reprieve." As Chui Wei spoke, a flash of unconcealed contempt and glee crossed her eyes, but a few days ago, the moneylender's thugs came knocking to collect a debt. In the scuffle, one of them kicked Chu Wenting right in the stomach. The pillow stuffed inside her fell right out, exposing the truth on the spot. Seeing his last hope cut off, Gao Yuxiang, in a fit of rage, wrote a letter of divorce right in front of everyone, viciously broke one of Chu Wanting's legs, and sold her to a human trafficker like a dead dog being dragged away. As I listened to this, my expression remained impassive. This was exactly the kind of thing Chu Wanting and Gao Yuxiang would do, selfish, foolish, and utterly shameless. Then how did she end up at the general's mansion? Wei Jinting furrowed his brow slightly, clearly disgusted by the sordid affairs within these estates. Yes, General, Cui Wei replied respectfully. When the slave trader saw that she was lame and disfigured, he locked her in the woodshed and starved her, planning to send her off to a penal camp at the border in a few days. She escaped last night by crawling through a dog hole while the guard was drunk. She's been so traumatized that she's completely lost her mind. All she remembers is that she must come to bring you bad luck on this very day, foolishly attempting to curse you with her own vile schemes. She's asking for trouble, Wei Jinting snorted coldly. 50 military canings, even if she were made of iron, she'd end up a pile of mush. The stray dogs at the mass grave are in for a feast tonight. As for that Gao Yuxiang cheated on the imperial examinations and had his degree revoked. On top of that, because he failed to repay his debts, the moneylenders cut off both his hands. Now he's scraping by on kitchen scraps with a bunch of beggars in a dilapidated temple south of the city. Cui Wei, ever perceptive, picked up the thread, and then there's the Chu family. I've heard that after you, madam, seized their family estates, Mr. and Mrs. Chu's business went into a tailspin. On top of that, they suffered several consecutive raids by river bandits who hijacked their cargo. Now they've sold off their assets and moved to the countryside to live in a cramped hovel. Mr. Chu was so enraged that he suffered a stroke. He lies paralyzed in bed all day, drooling. All those who ever schemed against me, looked down on me, or tried to climb the ladder by stepping on my own flesh and blood have met the most brutal backlash from the bitter fruits they sowed with their own hands. Good, very good. I picked up the warm bird's nest soup and took a leisurely sip. Its sweet, fragrant aroma spread across my lips and teeth. With that, the messy financial entanglement between Chu Mingyan and the Chu family was finally and completely settled. Let's go. It's about time. Wei Jinting stood up and used his broad palm to straighten a slightly askew golden hairpin in my bun, his gaze deep and intense. Today marks this general's grand celebration of the union of the dragon and the phoenix. The court officials in the front hall and the imperial gifts should have arrived by now. My lady, it is time to receive the homage of the entire realm. I put on a magnificent crimson brocade court robe and, with my head held high and chest out, took the hand Wei Jinting extended to me. As my husband and I walked side by side into the foyer, the once boisterous banquet fell instantly silent. Everyone looked at Wei Jinting, that godlike, arrogant tyrant, and then at me, standing beside him, radiant and with a presence that rivaled his own, and their eyes all betrayed a mix of awe and envy. The imperial edict has arrived. As the eunuch's shrill voice rang out, everyone in the mansion knelt in unison to receive the imperial decree. By the mandate of heaven, the emperor decrees, General Wei Jinting, guardian of the state, has pacified the southern frontier, rendering meritorious service to the state. Now, he has been blessed with the birth of twin sons and daughters, a true auspicious sign sent from heaven, demonstrating the blessings bestowed upon our great Li dynasty. His lawful wife, Lady Chu, is radiant, gentle, and kind-hearted. She has rendered meritorious service in supporting him and has borne children, truly serving as a model for the inner court. I hereby confer upon Lady Chu the title of first-rank Lady of Imperial Decree, and bestow upon her 10 bolts of crimson cloud brocade, 1 of eastern pearls, and a pair of jade ruby. So decreed. Your servant, and my wife, humbly accepts the imperial decree and expresses our gratitude. Long live the Emperor! Long live the Emperor! Long live the Emperor! With Wei Jinting's support, I rose steadily to my feet and accepted with both hands the bright yellow imperial edict, a symbol of supreme honor. At that moment, all the noble women who had once whispered behind my back about my status as a merchant stand-in bride bowed their noble heads deeply and looked at me with awe. 5 years later. In the capital, the early summer breeze is gentle. In the back garden of the general's mansion, 5-year-old Wei Hun was brandishing a miniature wooden sword, vigorously practicing the sword techniques his father had taught him. Meanwhile, his twin sister, Wei Jin, dressed in a pretty pink, chest-length dress adorned with auspicious floral patterns, was giggling as she chased a colorful butterfly through the flower beds. I sat on a cool daybed in the shade of a tree, flipping through the general ledger of the Jiangnan shops that had been sent by express mail from 800 li away. Over the past 5 years, I have not only managed the general's mansion with iron discipline, but, leveraging my status as a first-rank imperial lady and Wei Jinting's influence in the court, I have expanded the businesses under my name to every corner of the Dali dynasty. Today, half of the money houses and the silk and cloth trade in the capital are firmly under my control. Looking at the books again? A familiar, deep voice came from above me, and a pair of large hands, calloused from hard work, skillfully took the ledger from my hands, drawing me into his broad, warm embrace. Wei Jinting had just returned from court. He hadn't even had time to change out of his court robes before rushing impatiently to the back courtyard. He leaned down and pressed a gentle kiss to my temple, his eyes brimming with unwavering tenderness. "Daddy!" As soon as Wei Jin saw her father, she fluttered over like a butterfly and threw her arms around Wei Jinting's leg. With one hand, Wei Jinting effortlessly lifted his daughter into his arms, making the little girl giggle uncontrollably. Standing nearby, Wei Heng sheathed his sword and ran over respectfully to bow, his eyes brimming with admiration for his father. I quietly watched this heartwarming scene unfold before me, my heart filled with a sense of fulfillment unlike anything I had ever felt before. There was a time when my parents and closest relatives treated me like a discarded pawn, and my own younger sister pushed me into what she called a pit of fire. But none of them knew that I, Chu Mingyan, have never been a weak person who lets others push me around. I don't believe in false family ties, nor do I crave charity and love. I believe only in the hard-earned money in my hands and my own unyielding ruthlessness. Through a marriage arrangement I was destined to lose, I played my cards right. With reason in a firm hand, I won the absolute respect and deep love of this man who wields immense power over the realm. Today, I possess a fortune rivaling that of a nation, hold the honor of a first-rank imperial consort, have a husband who once was a cold-hearted fiend but has now become a tender and loyal companion, and am blessed with a pair of healthy, intelligent twin children, a boy and a girl. Here in this vast, tumultuous world, I have finally crushed all the thorns and schemes in my path and ascended to the pinnacle of my life, a life that belongs to me, Chu Mingyan. This era of prosperity and splendor, this fulfilled life, I have earned them all with my own hands, and no one can take them away. That's all for today. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Thank you.